Every once in a while, hockey loves to provide us with a feel-good story.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me today. Alongside me, we have my partner in crime, Nick Zeraris. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm disappointed that all of the 1 o'clock baseball games got rained out, but we'll have baseball later tonight and tomorrow, so it's okay.
It is the start of the spring, and thank goodness it's time to crawl out of the darkness of winter. But we're still going to talk about the negative stuff here on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We are going to be talking about how the Flames really aren't alone in this it's this soggy middle, this path of questions and the lack of direction for the most part. But then we're going to wrap up the show with some nice feel-good stories coming from within the Flames organization. And make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. I do want to give a shout out to Seth from Locked On Wild for loosely inspiring this. He did an episode, what the Wild can learn from the Stars, and kind of comparing their roster. So I thought, let's reverse the roles. Flames and Wild, and really anyone else.
Yeah, no, you can put quite a few teams into that bucket where when we talk about like range of outcomes, best and worst, all the way at the far end, and then in the middle where reasonably plausible. If you had told me this is how the Flame season was going to go, this was a likely outcome. You know, I wouldn't have been shocked or surprised. I would have been a little surprised that they actually committed to selling all of their unrestricted free agents. Other than that, you know, results-wise, this is about where they are talent-wise, especially now that they've traded guys away. But on top of the Flames, you could put the Capitals in here. You could put the Devils in here. You can put the Islanders in here. You could probably put the Senators and the Sabres in here. You can put the Penguins in here. You can put the aforementioned Wild, the Blues, the Kraken, the Coyotes. That very thick middle class of teams where they needed stuff to break their way if they were going to be a playoff team this year. But it wasn't impossible if they were going to make the playoffs.
Definitely. And all of those teams have either been struggling for a long time, like, you know, Arizona, the Senators, the Sabres.
Yeah.
Like, they're making slight progress from the absolute bottom of the barrel to, well, it gets a little bit better, not much. But then, like, you have the older teams like the Capitals and the Penguins that I used to really worry about playing them, especially come the playoffs as a Bruins
You could
fan.
put the Islanders in there as well. You
Yeah.
could put the Islanders in there as well. You put the Blues in there as well. You know, teams that had their success and they kind of unwound their position is the way I like to describe it.
Mhm.
Like at the end of The Big Short, where Steve Carell's sitting there and Jeremy Strong is like, all right, we got to sell. You got to start to unwind your position. And he's just sitting there second by second thinking about it. That's what they did. They won their Stanley Cups. They had to sell off their surplus players. You know, Washington lost Burakovsky. Pittsburgh lost, half their team. Granted, you know, that's 6-7 years ago, but still, you unwind your position. Tampa Bay is really hanging on, but it's really just a handful of guys dragging them through. There's a lot of teams in this soggy middle class, and it takes, in the course of a long season, you need bounces to go your way if you're going to have a good season. You look at the good teams, hell, you look at the Rangers, you look at the Bruins, you look at Florida. Those teams are all having guys who are having at least one or two guys, if not more than that, having career years.
Mm.
I'm not one to make a direct one-to-one to say, a team is having luck break their way if they're having guys set career years, especially if they play together because they're influencing each other's counting stats. But it's not a coincidence that teams that are up in that upper echelon that are competing for the President's Trophy, they're going to have 4 or 5 guys all having career years simultaneously.
Yeah, and a career year is obviously very important. I mean, we're seeing Blake Coleman have one, and that's really great. But Blake Coleman cannot carry the
Blake
Calgary.
Coleman can't be the best player on your hockey team. He can't. He
No,
can't. If Blake Coleman's your best forward, you're not a good team. That's not a
this
knock on Blake Coleman. That's not a knock on his skill set. He's a really good hockey player. He's really good in his role. A lot of teams would love to have him, but if he is the best player on your team, you're not that good.
Yeah. And the same thing with Tyler Toffoli last year.
Yeah.
He had a career year, and love Tyler Toffoli and Blake Coleman to pieces as players, and but they're not going to be your guy if
No.
you're a true cup contender.
No, look at Seattle. Seattle is the closest example you can get to that, where they're a team constructed through depth, where their mindset and the way they've built their roster is we are going to have the least fall off from forward 1 through forward 12. Not a single one of our guys is going to be insane. Like I think their leading point guy, it's either McCann or Bjorkstrand. They're both in like the 50s. They're not very clearly not scoring enough, not particularly individually talented players, useful players. You can make the playoffs playing the way with the type of roster Seattle has. They did it last year.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have as many avenues for relief if something doesn't work. We've used the analogy a lot about the Flames this year, where if everybody's not pulling in the same direction in a given game, if they're not perfect, if they're even a half beat off, it all falls apart because it's very fragile. That's the kind of situation Seattle's in. Or if you're a team like Minnesota that's had injury issues and goalie issues, if you're a team like the Islanders that have had consistency issues, same thing with the Penguins who have had consistency issues. If you are not perfect on the given night and your star players can only do so much. Sid's having a great year. God bless Sid trying this hard at 35, 36 years old. There's no rational reason he should be trying this hard on a season that's over. But he can't be the only one.
Yeah. And that's something we have quite literally talked about from day one of this season is, you cannot be so heavily reliant on one player. Like if you we watched the Flames at the start of the season, and they were playing like they were walking on eggshells. That is not going to be sustainable. You can't be afraid to make mistakes. They're bound to happen, but you also can't expect every single player to go out there and have a great game every night to be 110%. It is unbelievably unrealistic, and you're not going anywhere with that sort of constructed roster.
No, you need to have guys that can pick up slack. It's why you need depth. We're going to see over the course of the playoffs that start in about 3 weeks from now, the 18th or 19th. I forget what the report was. You're going to see teams sort themselves out, where there are going to be teams who, on paper, the first lines all match up relatively well. But once you get past that second line, that's where you really start to differentiate. I know that's been a point of contention with the Bruins in recent years, where after you got past Marchand, Pasternak, Bergeron, DeBrusque, the fall off was a little more stark in that bottom six. The Jets have been, not so much this year. Their third line is a lot better than it's been in recent history. Lowry, Appleton, Nemeshnikov, but the third line, the fourth line, that's where you see the real differentiators. That's been the issue with the Leafs forever. That's been the issue with the Oilers forever, where they expect their stars to do all of the heavy lifting. Their goal in the other minutes when they're not on the ice is to tread water. If their head goes under the water, they drown.
Yeah, and you don't want to be in that spot.
No,
So,
drowning is bad.
yeah, believe it or not, breaking news, drowning is not good. So, let's hopefully plug the leak in this sinking ship so we don't end up there. But coming up next, we are going to continue to talk about the expectations of the season and kind of where things are at for the Flames as well as other teams. But first, we are going to take a quick break, and I want to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zeraris. Are there any teams in that kind of bucket, that soggy middle class, that you are shocked? Are there this season?
I thought Pittsburgh would be better. I didn't think Pittsburgh was like going to push for a divisional spot, but them not being a wild card is a massive letdown. They jumped to mind. I expected Minnesota to be little bit closer. They're like 8 or 9 points back at the last playoff spot. They would basically need to win out and would need Vegas to lose out to have a chance to make the math work. They're in the single digits as far as probability. The question really, and this is something I love to talk about, and I use the quote all the time about there are 32 teams, only 10 really can win the Stanley Cup, 5 actually or try, 10 are trying to win, and 5 actually can. As far as this like unrealistic, I think there's a real there are two perspectives that are in direct opposition with each other because the franchise can't say we know we're not good. The team has to lie to the public to some degree and say, we're really excited about this, this, and this. We think because of those things, we're going to be able to be better than everyone expects us to be. Nobody's going to come out and say, we might have 85 points in the standings. If things break our way, maybe we get it in the playoffs. No one's going to come out and say that.
No. And no one in Calgary is going to come into this season and say, okay, we're done in April, but I'll see you in June for the Stampede because, I got to go play golf. I got to go back to Sweden or wherever I live. Like, you have to, unfortunately, sell a fantasy and hope that someone as delusional as myself will buy into it and think that this team, like the Flames, will make the playoffs up until the trade deadline.
And it's unfortunate. It's a reality of the commodification of sports as they've moved away from being like staples of the community to just flat out big business. And they've always been big business, but especially in the last 10 to 15 years, as like the sports industrial complex has kind of ironed out all the kinks to make it as profitable as possible and only continue to grow the profits. They're not going to come out and they are in direct contrast with the public interest. They want you to spend money no matter how bad the team is. They are willing to do whatever it takes to get you to spend money no matter how bad the team is. They need you to have emotional investment because emotional investment is where you will spend money irrationally. The team isn't good, but if they win 4 or 5 in a row and they're only 6 back of a playoff spot, there's a chunkier fan base that's going to be back and reinvested really quickly. It's a real conundrum as a fan, and you gotta respect your money at the end of the day as a fan. If your team's not good and the tickets are expensive, don't go. It's that simple. That is the most direct and actionable way a public can convey displeasure with the situation. If people stop showing up, especially in markets where they've generally drawn well, that's a way to send a message.
Definitely. And like, I've I've talked to a few Flames fans who have said, I haven't spent $1 on this team this season. It's not something I'm interested in continuing to funnel my money in. And I get it. And there's Red Sox fans doing the same thing. Like, this isn't just like a hockey exclusive thing. Um, just make smart decisions with your money. Like, I mean,
You work hard for
yeah,
it, man. Respect your money.
like, don't run out and buy like a Mangiapane jersey this off season because you might have just dumped $100+ down the drain. But again, I can't tell you what to do with your money. If you want to go to the Dome and get your little hot dogs every 3 weeks or however often you go to a game, have fun. Uh,
It's different because the tickets aren't that
oh,
expensive because the team's not great. It's different, you know. There are teams who, no matter how good or bad the team is, it's going to have an artificial price floor because of the secondary market. But
I hate.
there's an organicness to the Calgary community
Mhm.
that comes across where no matter what the game is, no matter what the situation is, crowd always has a little bit of juice. Crowd always just they want a reason to care. They desperately want a reason to care, and so often over the last 2 years, the Flames haven't given them one.
No. And I feel like they had stuff to care about with players like Gaudreau and Kachuk, and then that was ripped away from them. And now their jaws are just kind of on the floor, like, oh, okay, well, what do I do now? And
I think
yeah,
I think it's a real challenge because we talked about it yesterday from Tree Living's perspective of he had to do something to stop the bleeding. He had to make some type of transactions because he knew Kachuk wasn't going to resign and Gaudreau was leaving. He had to do something to stop the bleeding temporarily so that if he kept the job beyond last year, he would have a roster to work with. You know, I don't know if he envisioned a full-on sell-off like they actually ended up doing, but he planned in case he wanted to keep the job. That's why he went out and brought in Kadri, why they brought in Huberdeau, Uyghur, and why they did what they did. But from the organizational perspective of how do we get to our goal? We need to get an engaged fan base who's going to be patient enough with us as we transition. And I think because they were upfront, because that was one of the first things Conroy said when he got the job was, "I'm not letting guys leave for nothing." I think that bought him time. I think for the most part, I think most Flames fans would say this is kind of what they expected. This isn't an underperformance. This is about where they are talent wise. They're playing three pretty unproven defensemen every given night. They're playing Dustin Wolf or dinged up Jacob Markstrom. I would expect the team to struggle. This is not a case of being unrealistic. The Flames are about where they're supposed to be. There are teams out there that were unrealistic. We can mention the Penguins, we can mention the Blues. We could probably mention teams like we could probably mention the Wild, we could probably mention Seattle, teams that think, "Hey, all we need is a couple things to break our way and we're right in the mix." It's okay to operate like that every now and then. And it's different for some of them. Like, the Blues won their cup already. Pittsburgh's won their cups already. So if they want to roll the dice, they're more inclined to see what happens. They are not in a position where it's going to result in sweeping change quickly if they struggle.
yeah, and it's I, I don't know if anyone really came into this season with like the hard pressed notion that this team is a playoff team. Like, no one,
No.
like, sure, you hope that they make the playoffs, but I don't know if anyone was saying if this team doesn't make the playoffs, they need to blow it up. No, we have been saying that for years now, and they have. And the trade deadline was them just pressing the dynamite button at this point with what was left and what they had to work with. And now it's time to kind of just start building and moving forward.
Recalibrate.
Yep. But coming up next, we will end on a much more positive and lighter note, with a kind of discussion of the athletic article that Julien McKenzie put out regarding Jonathan Huberdeau and Lanny McDonald's connection over the last few years and why keeping guys around after they retire, it pays off. But first, we're going to take a quick break here, and I want to talk to you all about FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who is going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Thanks everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts and on YouTube as well. As many of us, if not all of us, know, Lanny McDonald had a very serious cardiac event earlier in the season and obviously was in the hospital. And he has been such a staple in this organization for so long, over 40 years, 40 years, I would say, since, no, I can't do math, but it's been longer than we've both been alive.
41
I would
years.
say.
His first year with the organization was 81, 82, if I remember correctly. It might be 82. Yeah, 81, 82. So 41 years. That's more than half of his life has been committed to the Flames organization and the Calgary community at large.
That's a lot of your life. That's incredible. And we have seen him become so well integrated with this locker room. He's always been around, but this locker room specifically has been just, he's been like the shining light and keeping these guys level-headed. And Julien McKenzie wrote a wonderful article for the Athletic about how he's become a mentor, or like a mentor, for Jonathan Huberdeau.
Yeah, and this is something we talk about a lot, and the lens we talked about this through is how can you make the organization as attractive as possible? There are some things you can't control. The salary cap is what it is. But there are things you can spend unlimited money on. You can spend as much as you want on your organization stuff. You can have as much support staff. You can put as much money as you want into your alumni association, into your facilities. And that's one of the things that teams that take their role seriously as far as community building, ingratiating themselves with the public, taking care of your alumni is something that's really easy to do. It's only money. You're a billionaire, and it's easy goodwill. It is free and easy goodwill to keep these guys around the organization. Some of them take a more direct hands-on role, like Lanny McDonald, where he wants to be in the locker room. He wants to be a resource for guys on the team if they want that. There are some who are just happy to show up to the alumni events once or twice a year, go to games, take pictures, kiss babies, shake hands, all that good stuff. But for guys who take that initiative, it really speaks a lot to their character that they care. You're not going to find me spending a lot more time at my job trying to help people with the stuff they're dealing with. If you're my friend, that's different, but I'm not spending extra time at work out of the goodness of my heart like Lanny McDonald is. There are a lot of people who they retire from hockey, they go into another walk of life, they pop in every once in a while, and that's it. No, Lanny McDonald's a lifer.
Yeah. And there are so many reasons why having him around is good. Especially this locker room needs as much stability and reasons to believe in themselves as possible. And I feel like having someone as established and decorated and genuine as Lanny has been great. And he talks about how Huberdeau is he's shy. He's a quiet guy that loves hockey, and the pressure of him coming to Calgary as the return for, a bona fide superstar was going to be hard, and the pressure was going to be a lot for him, and Huberdeau owned that. He said, yeah, It's tough.
And the other thing on top of that it does, sends a message. If you take care of your business, you can be like that. It's why there are a lot of organizations. I know the Yankees do this ad nauseum, but there's a reason the Yankees bring every single guy who's ever worn the jersey to spring training every
Yep.
year. It sends a message that we have a standard, a really high standard here. If you take care of your business, you can be one of those guys. Having a guy like Lanny McDonald around, in this case directly, the one-on-one relationship, friendship with Huberdeau, is great, but it sends an implicit message to everybody else. He won a cup here. He is immortal because he won a cup here. You take care of
Mhm.
business, you win a championship here, your name lives on forever. You are inherently tied to that organization for the rest of your life, especially in a market
Mhm.
like Calgary, where it's so important for the guys who want to be here to be appreciated for wanting to be here. We always,
Right.
as teams of small market teams, we always hear, well, guys don't want to sign there, they don't want to stay there. That's why the guys who do want to be here matter so much.
Absolutely. And that's actually a really good point because I feel like we only tend to talk about it, just as hockey fans in general, as, oh, this guy doesn't want to play in a small market. This guy doesn't want to play in Canada, whatever the case is. And it's, why the Blake Colemans matter. It's why, Jonathan Huberdeau matters, why McKenzie like they're in Cadre, like they should be celebrated. And that's not celebrating them for doing the bare minimum. It just speaks to who they are and not wanting to take, I guess, the easy way out, if you want to call it that, in signing with a larger market team that is potentially going to be better.
It depends what you care about. At the end of the day, you can't begrudge guys for doing what's right for them. A lot of them, they
Right.
only get one or two chances to go to a team where they get to pick where they play, where they live, where they move their family. I understand that wholly. I don't begrudge guys who go out on July 1st, get the most money they possibly can, with little regard for what happens after they sign the contract and the first direct deposit hits. I understand. I wholly understand. But from a fan perspective, we want to see guys who want to be here because then you get invested. I was talking about this the other day with somebody about why the Marvel movies don't matter anymore. And it's because all the characters anybody had stakes in, they're not around anymore. It is hard for me to be as invested as somebody who just popped up in a movie for the first time now as I was in Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man or Chris Evans' Captain America, because I'd had 7 or 8 years of movies with those guys. I've spent a lot of
Right.
time and investment with them. It's the same thing in sports. You keep guys here long term, you get me invested in them, who they are as people, their character, what they mean to the team. Then we're cooking with grease.
Yep. And that's, I mean, the Flames are, they feel like such, I hate when people say, oh, like they're a class act organization. Because, like, I would certainly hope a $1 billion company and operation is functioning well. But it has such like a family feel to it. Like they will take care of you. Um, and it's not just, don't let the door hit you on the way out sort of thing.
It's important. It's one of the things. Ooh, excuse me. It's one of the things you can control. Like I was talking about before with spending money. Human interaction and being a good person, that matters. You can put effort and resources into taking care of your people and promoting a good culture. It's good for the guys in the room, it's good for the front office, it's good for the business side of things. The better your organization, the better chances you are of having good people want to stick around, and that's your goal. We talked about that a lot last summer, that the goal going forward is building something that people are going to want to be a part of. And this is an example. They won their cup in 40 something years, 80, 88, 88, 89 season. Yeah. They won their cup a long time ago. We're coming up on 40 years in a couple of years from now. It's a long time. Those guys
Mhm.
still immortal. Lanny McDonald, there's a reason he's in the Hockey Night in Canada montage at the start of the playoffs every year. There's a reason him
Mhm.
holding the Stanley Cup as the captain of the Flames is in the montage at the end and the beginning of the playoffs on Sportsnet every single year. That's one of those
And that's
things you're never
just
going to forget.
Do you think that, or no, Craig Conroy said it during the same press conference where he said, we're not letting these guys walk for free, but they don't want hostages. There's
We don't want
no,
hostages. Word to Mike Tomlin, we don't want hostages. We want willing
like,
participants.
and that's the environment you should want to
Yes.
foster. I don't, like you said, I don't hold it against anyone that wants to go out and get their bag like a Noah Hannafin. But I really do like it and appreciate it when players ride the wave of the Calgary Flames.
All you can do is hope. All you can do is the stuff you can control. The hockey players got to take care of the hockey, but everybody else, you can do a little bit better.
Yes. And that will do it for us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. You can give us a 5-star rating if you'd like. That'd be super cool, and a nice little review. Nick, do you have any final words for us today?
Baseball.